Shalom, shalom, Israel. First and foremost, I want to give all praises to Yahweh Hashem Yahushua. And this is a quick video I got on First Timothy 4:1. And which a lot of people, it's a stumbling block for some people. Um, you know, a lot of people, they read this, they get led astray. But we're gonna clean it up through the Spirit. All right. So to look at First Timothy chapter 4 and verse number 1. It reads, it says, "Now the Spirit speaketh expressly, that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils, speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their conscience seared with a hot iron." Right? So this is the point in verse 3 where, it becomes a stumbling block. It says, "Forbidding to marry and commanding to abstain from meats, which Yahweh hath created to be received with thanksgiving of them which believe and know the truth." So in verse 3, you had people, was mainly us, we tell people that, sex is marriage and that you can't be a whoremonger, meaning, you can't be, sleeping around with everybody. Now, we're not saying that you can't get married, but again, sex is marriage, and you want to be careful who you lay down with, right? Reading on and commanding to abstain from meats. Now, obviously in the law, you have clean and unclean beasts, clean and unclean meat that you can eat, that you can't eat. And we tell people, hey, there is certain meats that you can and can't eat, but you get certain people, other people say, hey, as long as you, offer it up with, prayer and you pray over your food, it's okay. Reading on, which Yahweh have created to be received with thanksgiving. Right. So again, people think that, oh yeah, as long as you receive it with thanksgiving, you pray over it, you pray to the Lord over it and you give thanks, that's it. You can't eat anything, right? Whether it's shrimp, crab, lobster, pork. They believe that, these things can be eaten. But if you read verse 1 from the top, right, it says, Apostle Paul is writing this letter to Timothy, and he's letting Timothy know that in the latter times, some shall depart from the faith, right? What's the faith? This doctrine, right? This true doctrine, right? Knowing the law, statutes, and commandments, what you can and cannot do. And some people are going to depart from that, right? How? Giving heed to seducing spirits. And these seducing spirits, people tell people, well, you got to mainly, a lot of these pastors, they say, and they get it from these pastors, how the pastors say, you can come as you are, eat what you want to eat. And, reading on this, these are all doctrines of devils, doctrines of deceivers, right? Nowhere in the law, nowhere in the book where it says, you can come as you are, you can, eat whatever you want to eat. Right, these are all seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. Even when you're reading, Acts the 10th chapter, as Simon is saying, Peter is saying, "Hey, Lord, I've never eaten anything unclean before." And so he's telling you right there, and right there is, there's a difference between the clean and the unclean. So when you read right, when you're reading at the end of verse 3, right, where it says, Yahweh hath created to be received with thanksgiving of them which believe and know the truth. So Paul is telling Timothy, there's going to be, people, certain people, the elect, they're going to believe and know the truth. And what does it mean to believe? Right, let's go to the book of Sirach. Oh man, just doesn't have the apocrypha. Slack. Bear with me. see if this is it. This is not it. Trying to look for it. I thought I had it. Can't believe this. Oh, okay, here we go. All right, we should be good. Let me share the screen. I think this is it right here. Let me see. Oh, there we got it. All right, so this is Book of Sirach, chapter 32, verse 24. All right, let's see what it means to believe. Right, it says, "He that believeth in the Lord taketh heed to the commandment, and he that trusteth in him shall fare never the worse." So it says, "He that believeth in the Lord taketh heed to the commandment." So once you believe in the Lord, you take heed to the commandment. That's what it means to believe. All right, let's go back. So, this is why it's very important to, go precept upon precept. You don't go precept upon precept, you're not going to get these scriptures. Right? That's all, going back to the milk. Right, going back to 1 Timothy 4:1. Right, so we know what it means to believe. Right, it says, and to know the truth. Let's see if we can get another screen going. Right, what does it mean to we'll get this one. So, what's it mean to know the truth? It's Book of Psalms. Psalms 119. Psalms 119. I think it's 142. 142. Let's look at Psalm chapter 119 and verse 42. All right, what is the truth? It says, "Thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and the law is the truth." Right? So that's what the truth is, right? The truth, to believe, it all goes back to the law, right? All goes back to the law, keeping the commandments. So when you read in verse 3, it's not saying that you can't marry. You're going to have some that tell you can't marry. Or you're going to have some people that say that you can't eat meat. But there is a distinction between the clean and the unclean. Right? To believe and know the truth all goes back to the law and keeping the commandments. It says for every creature, and this is where you get, a lot of this is a stumbling block for a lot of people. It says for every creature of Yahweh is good, And so you get people in the church, Christians, Baptists alike, Pentecostal, all these different religions, they get these different doctrines from their pastors and whomever else. They just, they're not understanding that you have to go precept upon precept. So when they're reading this, they see that every creature, right? Every creature, you got a guy, well, I was watching this YouTube video. He's got a day called Yahweh Shai Day. I actually think he was doing it on the Passover where he was saying that, you can eat pork. And so you read this and it says, for every creature of Yahweh is good. They think they can eat any creature. I mean, you got people. People are considered creatures. People are considered beasts in the Bible. So when it says, for every creature of Yahweh is good, can you eat people? Right? Can you eat possums and squirrels and raccoons and rats? No. It says, and nothing to be refused. So wait a minute. That means you can eat anything, right? According to them, right? That's why you have to go precept upon precept. It says, if it be received with thanksgiving, and this is where it becomes a stumbling block because it says nothing to be refused, right? You don't have to, everything is, is a full go. You don't have to refuse anything. You can put anything on your plate. If it's received with thanksgiving, if you offer it up to the Lord, right? It says, for it is sanctified by the word of Yahweh and prayer. See that? So, you got people that say, well, it's sanctified. I prayed over it. I kissed it up to the Most High. And that was sanctified by the word of Yahweh. They would say the word of God. But what does it mean to be sanctified? Right? Let's go to see what it means to be sanctified. Sanctified. This is the book of, let's go to the law. Right? This is actually the law. Let's look at Leviticus chapter 11 and let's start at 43. All right, so the book of Leviticus, actually this whole thing, if you read Leviticus 11 and 1, you'll see that, let's start at verse 2. It says, speak unto the children of Israel, saying, these are the beasts which ye shall eat among all the beasts that are on the earth. Right? And it'll tell you these are all the beasts that are clean and unclean. And guess what? The law still stands today. To this day, the law is still in effect. So we're going to jump down to verse 43. It says, ye shall not make yourselves abominable with any creeping thing. Right? We're going into what it means to be sanctified, set apart, holy. You shall not make yourselves abominable with any creeping thing that creepeth, neither shall you make yourselves unclean with them, that ye should be defiled thereby. For I am the Lord your God, you shall therefore sanctify yourselves. Right? What does it mean to sanctify yourselves? To be holy. And you should be holy, for I am holy. Neither shall you defile yourselves with any manner of creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. For I am the Lord your power that bringeth you up out of the land of Egypt. To be your power, you shall therefore be holy, being separate or set apart, for I am holy. This is the law of the beast and of the fowl and of every living creature. See that? This is the creature that moveth in the waters, of every creature that creepeth upon the earth. Here's a point, verse 47, to make a difference between the unclean and the clean, and between the beast that may be eaten and the beast that may not be eaten. Right? That's what it means to be sanctified. Sanctified just means to be consecrated or set apart or to be holy. And so you can't be holy if you're eating things that are unclean or right, you can't eat anything that's unclean. Right, going back in verse, what was it just that? Verse 5, right? So verse 6, it says, if thou put the brethren in remembrance of these things, see, Paul is telling Timothy, if you put the brother in remembrance in these things, guess what? They once knew that these things were, unrighteous, abominable, right? They once knew that they had to keep the commandments, right? Thou shalt be a minister of Yahweh Shah HaMashiach, nourished up in the words of faith. See that? What it means to have faith. And it says, and of good doctrine, right? Hey, this sound doctrine, right? What is good doctrine? What is sound doctrine? The Israelites are only them can receive salvation in the kingdom of heaven, right? Other nations are heathens; they're going into captivity, right? Good doctrine is the gospel, right? It says 1 and 2 thou has attained. So let's go. What does it mean to have faith, right? Let's go. Let's go to Psalms. What does it mean to have faith? Is that Psalms? Psalms? Yeah, I believe it's Psalms. 119 again. Is it 186 or 86? Let's see. Let me use this precept in a minute. Come on, what does it mean to have faith? All thy commandments, see that? All thy commandments are faithful. They persecute me wrongfully, help thou me. So when you see this, when you read this whole, the first 4 verses, actually it's like the first 6 verses. If you go precept upon precept and dissect it, especially if you read the first verse, Paul is telling Timothy that in a latter time, some are going to depart from the faith, the commandments. Some are going to be led by seducing spirits. Some are going to be led by doctrines of devils. Doctrines that are going to be people that are deceivers. But if you read, all these verses from, what it talks about to believe and know the truth, for every creature of God is good. What is good? What does it mean to be good? All right, let's go to it. Let's get another precept of what it means to be good. All right, you gotta go precept upon precept. You gotta have people that say you don't need the Old Testament. You don't have to read the Old Testament. You don't have to read the New Testament. When in fact they go hand in hand, and I'm proving that to you. Right? You need the Old and the New Testament, or else this Bible would never make sense. So we're going to go to. All right. So what does it mean to be good? All right, this is the last one. Look at Romans 7 and 12. Wherefore the law is holy, the commandments holy, and just and good. So that's what it means to be good. Keeping the law, keeping the commandments. These things are holy unto the Lord. These things are just, which makes the law good. And that's what it means to be good. Right? So that's 1 Timothy 4 and 1. Lord willing, this video was edifying. I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh Shem Shai. Kwame Yashua, Shalom.